Welcome, esteemed listeners. My name is Professor Crazy, a comedian professor whose specialty is extracting humor from the most absurd situations. Today, I will tell you a tickling tale about a man named Brian, whose adventures in the gym will make you laugh until your stomach hurts. On a bright day, Brian decided to change his life. It's time for me to become a healthier and more muscular man, he thought. With burning enthusiasm, he stepped into the nearest gym with a stride full of confidence. However, what he didn't realize was that this gym was no ordinary place. It was an arena for unexpected silliness. Brian began his adventure with the first exercise machine, a device that looked like it had come from the future. With blinking buttons, levers, and touch screens, the machine resembled a spaceship more than a piece of exercise equipment. Not wanting to look foolish, Brian decided to read the instructions displayed next to the machine. Unfortunately, the instructions were written in a language he didn't understand. It can't be that hard, he muttered as he pressed a random button. Suddenly, the machine came to life and started moving at a shocking speed. Brian was shaken back and forth, his hands gripping tightly onto what seemed to be the only thing separating him from being thrown into space. People around him began to gather, watching with a mix of concern and amusement. After what felt like a lifetime, the machine finally stopped. Brian, with a pale face, stepped down from the machine. I'm fine, he said, trying not to look shaken. He walked unsteadily towards the yoga area, hoping to find some peace after the tense experience. In the yoga area, Brian saw a group of people who looked very calm and focused. They were performing complicated poses, and Brian, not wanting to be outdone, decided to join in. He laid down his mat and began to follow the instructor's movements. However, when it came to the downward-facing dog pose, Brian realized that his flexibility was not on par with the others in the class. He tried to reach his far-off feet, but what happened was a loud crack from his back. Brian froze, hoping no one heard. However, all eyes in the class were on him, and some couldn't even hold back their laughter. Brian smiled awkwardly. I guess I need more yoga practice, he said, trying not to look embarrassed. After the yoga class, Brian felt the need to redeem his failure. He looked towards the weights and decided to try lifting. He picked up the smallest dumbbell, thinking it was a safe choice. However, when he tried to lift it, he realized it was much heavier than he thought. With tremendous effort, Brian managed to lift the dumbbell to chest height. But when he tried to lower it back down, his hands trembled and the dumbbell fell to the floor with a thunderous sound. Everyone in the gym turned to look, and Brian could only laugh. I guess I need to start with something lighter, he said, scratching his head. Not wanting to give up, Brian moved on to the next workout station. This time, he chose a machine that looked simpler. He sat down and began pedaling the stationary bike. However, he didn't realize he had set the resistance to the maximum level. Brian's legs spun at an incredible speed, and he began to feel like he was participating in the Tour de France. Sweat started pouring from his face, and he tried to stop the bike. But the more he tried, the faster his legs spun. People around him began to clap, thinking Brian was doing something extraordinary. Brian, out of breath, finally managed to stop the bike and smiled wearily at his audience. After resting for a moment, Brian decided to try one more exercise. This time, he chose a machine that didn't look too intimidating. He sat down and began pulling the rope connected to the weights. However, he didn't realize he had chosen a weight that was too heavy for him. When he pulled the rope, the weight didn't budge at all. Brian pulled harder, but the weight remained stationary. He pulled with all his might, and suddenly, the weight came loose and Brian fell backward. He sat on the floor, laughing heartily. I guess I need more strength training, he said while dusting off his pants. Brian felt that he had done enough exercise for the day. He walked towards the changing room with mixed feelings of embarrassment and pride. He had tried new things, even though they didn't always work out. However, he knew he would be back again, as the gym had given him stories to tell for years. In the changing room, Brian met a man who seemed to have been watching his adventures all day. The man smiled and said, this gym has surveillance cameras. You might become the star of our gym video this week. Brian laughed. As long as it makes others laugh, I don't mind. Brian went home feeling satisfied. He might not have been the most muscular man in the gym, but he was certainly the most entertaining. He imagined himself as an accidental comedy star, and the thought made him smile all the way home. The next day, Brian returned to the gym with renewed enthusiasm. He was determined not to make the same mistakes. However, as often happens in life, plans don't always go as expected. Brian started with a simple warm-up exercise, but even that didn't go smoothly. He stumbled while running on the treadmill and almost fell. However, he managed to grab the handle and continued running as if nothing had happened. After warming up, Brian decided to try strength training again. This time, he chose lighter weights and managed to do several repetitions smoothly. "Oh, this is better," he thought, lifting his chin proudly. However, when he tried to put the weight back on the rack, he misjudged the distance and, clang! The weight fell right on the foot of a bodybuilder training next to him. The bodybuilder turned with a look that could burn holes in the wall. Brian, feeling like a tiny mouse in front of a lion, began to apologize frantically. Sorry. I didn't see you there, he repeated. Fortunately, the bodybuilder just laughed and said, it's okay, bro. Everyone makes mistakes. Brian breathed a sigh of relief and promised himself to be more careful. With his heart still racing, Brian decided to end his workout session with something more relaxing. He headed to the pool and jumped into the refreshing water. However, in his overzealous spirit, he didn't realize that he had jumped into a lane that was being used for synchronized swimming practice. The swimmers, startled by their uninvited guest, tried to stay composed while avoiding Brian's chaotic freestyle swimming. Brian, finally realizing his mistake, hurried out of the pool with his cheeks burning red. He apologized to the swimmers and their coach, who could only shake their heads while smiling. I guess I should check the training schedule before swimming," Brian mumbled as he dried himself off. As Brian prepared to leave, he reflected on the day full of surprises. He might not have gained the muscles he dreamed of, but he certainly gained experiences he would never forget. And who knows? Maybe one day, he'll be able to tell the story of today without feeling embarrassed. Brian left with a light step and a heart full of stories. He knew that tomorrow was a new day, and he would return to the gym with the same spirit, perhaps with a bit more caution. But one thing was certain, Brian would always have gym giggle stories to tell. Remember friends, life is like a workout in the gym. Sometimes you lift weights, sometimes you become the weight. But what's important is that you keep lifting your spirits. Don't let one or two failures make you forget that every sweat is the ink that writes your success story. So, keep swimming even if sometimes you're in the wrong pool. Keep running even if you sometimes stumble. Because in the gym of life, what you can't lift today might just be your warm-up tomorrow. Keep laughing, for the best abdominal muscles are those formed from unrestrained laughter. And remember, in the gym as in life, what matters most is not the weight you lift, but how much laughter you can harvest. So, lift your weights, but don't forget to also lift the corners of your lips. May these words be an entertaining motivation for you all. Keep exercising and laughing, for both are the best recipe for a healthy and happy soul. Until the next story, Professor Crazy will return with more laughter and madness. Stay spirited and don't forget, life is to be lived with full of jokes and laughter.